China's growth over the last 40 years has been nothing short of miraculous. There's no denying this incredible achievement, even if you're not a fan of China's government. More importantly, China has given developing countries in the global south a blueprint to follow by studying China's economic rise. In 1978, China was poorer than almost all African and Latin American countries. Today, China is an $18 trillion economy, larger than the European Union and on pace to surpass the United States within a few years. But here are where things get very interesting. China's GDP per capita is now $13,000, which means it is on the brink of escaping the middle income trap. As this forecast from The Economist shows, China will join the club of developed or advanced economies within the next 2 years. Moreover, in Tier 1 cities such as Beijing, Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, the GDP per capita is $28,000, putting these Chinese megacities on par with European countries like Spain. Thus, parts of China are already enjoying developed economies. So how did China accomplish such an incredible growth? And more importantly, as China's economy starts to experience some slowdowns in 2023, is the Chinese growth model officially dead? In today's video, I'm going to reveal 15 secrets behind China's rise and explain how China became the world's fastest growing superpower. But stick to the end of the video, as I'll also reveal what the future of China looks like and debunk the myth that China is going to collapse. Number 1, investment, exports, and savings. There are 3 factors that comprise the proven strategy of other Asian tigers like Japan, Singapore, and South Korea in building a successful economy. The first is enticing foreign companies to invest in domestic manufacturing and then accumulating foreign exchange reserves through exports. This chart details how impressive China's strategy has worked. In 1992, China exported only $58 billion worth of products. By 2014, China surpassed the US to become the world's #1 exporter. Fast forward to 2022, and China exported nearly $4 trillion worth of goods. China's ability to attract foreign direct investment has been impressive over the past 3 decades, amounting to a staggering $3 trillion. Even though China stopped being a low-wage country and has been facing trade wars with the United States, it is still the #2 country in the world in terms of attracting FDI. The Chinese are also prolific savers, meaning Chinese banks have huge capital which they can leverage to invest in infrastructure and other forms of investments to continue to boost growth. Consider that Chinese households have over $18 trillion of savings and bank deposits, the largest in the world. Number 2, communism and capitalism. China has created an efficient hybrid system of communism and capitalism. Huge state-owned enterprises flourish alongside a vibrant private sector. To get rich is glorious, claimed Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. China has embraced stock markets, privatization, free market, entrepreneurship, venture capitalists, and startups that have all churned out millionaires and even billionaires. Consider that the stock market in mainland China is worth $12 trillion, and China was #1 in the world in funds raised through IPOs last year. There are millions of millionaires and hundreds of billionaires in China right now. At the same time, the Chinese government has remained at the apex of power and also prevented an irrational exuberance of capitalism. This is why China has been able to avoid large recessions, like the 2008 financial crisis that wrecked the US economy. This unique model has been so successful that there are now more Chinese than American companies in the global Fortune 500 list. 136 Chinese firms, not including Taiwan, versus 124. Number 3, long-term planning and meritocracy. The Chinese government is well known for using 5-year plans to build the economy, and it's not uncommon for Chinese leaders to plan the country's future for the next 10, 20, or even 30 years. The lack of public elections in China is considered a weakness from a Western perspective, but since bureaucrats and politicians did not have to appeal to populism or worry about the next elections, Chinese leaders can make tough decisions that are needed for the future development of the country. While Westerners often criticize the Chinese government, this is actually the exact same strategy Singapore used in its ascension to becoming one of the richest countries in the world. In China, politicians are promoted based on measurable achievements, just like a corporation. So one must have experience in managing small towns, large cities, and mega provinces before rising to a top-level government position. Some people think that Xi Jinping and others in Beijing micromanage the entire country. However, this is false and impractical. While Beijing may dictate broad goals, like poverty reduction, GDP growth, and job creation, local governments have enormous flexibility to come up with optimal strategies tailored to the local economy. Local governments, in fact, account for 80% of China's spending. Another interesting aspect is that there is an intense and healthy competition among various Chinese cities and provinces on who can grow faster and better. Number 4, the WTO and Free Trade. China's extraordinary growth really took off after joining the World Trade Organization in 2001. Afterwards, as a part of the global community, China could sell its products to the entire world. Since then, China has signed numerous free trade agreements like the RCEP. This chart clearly shows the transformation in trade power. In 2000, the US dominated world trade. By 2020, China was the #1 trading partner for more than 120 countries. Number 5, imitate first, innovate later. Initially, Chinese companies were known as copycats. They would copy and paste business models, products, and marketing strategies, including logos, slogans, and product names of Western companies. However, this was just the first phase in learning. Eventually, Chinese firms became skilled enough to compete with foreign firms. A great example of Chinese transformation is Shein, which is now the world's largest fast fashion company with a valuation of $100 billion. Chinese sportswear companies Anta and Li Ning now produce more revenues in China than popular Western brands like Nike and Adidas. And of course, the phenomenal success of TikTok that has crushed competition from Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube is a testimony to Chinese technology and business strength. In the automobile sector, BYD once copied low-end Toyota models, but now BYD is the 4th largest automaker in the world, and China has surpassed Japan to become the world's largest exporter of cars in 2023. There are numerous other examples in virtually all other sectors, including smartphones, appliances, computers, and so on. Number 6, industrial champions and strategic manufacturing. The Chinese government picks champions in various sectors and helps them succeed with policies and subsidies. Huawei is a prominent example. Other sectors like solar panels, electric cars, rare earth minerals, and semiconductors are also highly promoted and guided by the Chinese government. Over the past decade, China has cultivated over 40,000 companies, or champions, that focus on a particular section of the supply chain in cutting-edge industries. Thanks to such strategic planning, China is the #1 global manufacturer of 200 critical industrial products. This chart shows how China came to dominate the EV industry in manufacturing and sales. China's world market share was non-existent 10 years ago, but has now risen to 58% in 2022. This is only made possible by the strategic planning of the Chinese government. Number 7, poverty eradication. While the government has focused on building modern cities and infrastructure, it also understood the need to lift everyone, not just the rich. This is a core principle of socialism, and why the Chinese government wants to ensure that the tide makes all boats rise together, and that opportunities are given to every member of the Chinese society. China has put in enormous and unique efforts over the past 40 years in lifting over 800 million people out of extreme poverty. In this process, the government has spent a lot of money in building world-class infrastructure in rural areas and even building millions of homes for the poor. Eradicating poverty, of course, helps the people, but it is also a smart business decision. By creating the world's largest middle class, China is ensuring more workers can contribute to building the future of China's economy. Number 8, political and economic stability. While China has stringent censorship compared to Western nations, this has led to social stability. Earlier this year, research group Edelman published the 2023 Trust Barometer report, detailing how countries around the world trust their governments. When respondents were asked the question, "Will my family and I be better off financially in 5 years?" China was the only country who experienced an increase from last year. 65% of Chinese responded yes, while only 36% of Americans responded the same. What's even more revealing is that 24 of 28 countries in the survey is at an all-time low. China's economic growth over the past 4 decades has bred confidence and trust amongst the Chinese population. And it's no wonder that China leads the world in this survey, with 89% of Chinese people stating they trust their government, while only 42% of Americans feel the same. Number 9, moving up the value chain, automation, and robots. China has consistently moved up the manufacturing value chain, constantly making more and more complex items. In the past, Chinese workers were employed by foreign companies to perform labor-intensive and low-quality jobs. But now, Chinese companies make the world's most advanced computer screens, electric batteries, and semiconductor chips. Chinese companies now supply 95% of the components that go into Tesla cars manufactured in the Shanghai Gigafactory. Finally, Huawei's new smartphone is entirely made of Chinese parts, including the leading-edge semiconductor chips. That's an incredible testament to how far China has moved up the value chain to make high-quality products. Chinese companies have also integrated automation and robots to remain competitive and productive for the future of manufacturing. China now buys more than half of all industrial robots in the world. Number 10, 360-degree growth. The key to success is complete growth across the entire society. For example, China has built thousands of colleges and improved education dramatically over the past 2 decades, all in an effort to make sure that the next generation of highly educated workers can keep the country growing in the future. China now ranks number 1 in science, math, and reading in international scores for high school students. Tsinghua University now ranks number 1 in the world for computer science and engineering, even surpassing world-renowned colleges like MIT. Also, China has emphasized vocational schools, which are the key to China's success in manufacturing. This is a valuable takeaway not only for developing nations, but also for the United States and Europe. Most importantly, the government has ensured growth in rural areas and poor regions as well. Just look at the infrastructure and the GDP per capita growth in Guizhou, the poorest province in China. Number 11, R&D and Innovation. China has also made tremendous progress in science and technology. Since 2019, China has ranked number 1 in international patents. In regular patents, China is far ahead of everyone else. In scientific papers, China became number 1 in the world in 2017 in terms of annual publications. In 2022, China was the top 1% of the most cited science papers, and earlier this year, China surpassed the United States in terms of most papers published in the world's top journals. But how did China achieve this? Simply by investing a lot of money. China leads the world in R&D spending and currently ranks number 12 in the 2023 Global Innovation Index. Number 12, infrastructure and constant improvement. While many Westerners have taken infrastructure for granted, China has invested an enormous amount of money to build world-class infrastructure the past 30 years. Here is a graph detailing the top 10 Chinese cities by GDP. Travel to any of them and you certainly won't believe that China is a developing country. China leads the world with over 170,000 kilometers of expressways. China operates the world's most advanced rail network with over 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rails. China operates the world's largest urban transit system with 49 subway systems spread across 47 cities. 7 of the 10 busiest seaports in the world are in China, and over half the world's skyscrapers are also located in the Middle Kingdom. Despite all the robust growth in industrialization, China has also transformed itself into the leader of green energy, dominating the fields of solar, wind, and hydroelectricity. There was a time when China was focused only on growth, but now the emphasis is on a higher standard of living. Pollution used to be a nightmare in China, but fast forward to today, and major cities like Beijing and Shanghai aren't even ranked in the top 400 of most polluted cities in the world. Incredibly, Shenzhen, the Silicon Valley of China, ranks number 1,500 in the world in terms of pollution. Number 13, cultural values. Like many Asian countries, Chinese society values education, discipline, hard work, and family values. Such traditional values create a society of good students and good workers that underpin the success of the country. Collectivism is as much as an East Asian value as it is a communist ideal. Thus, many problems are addressed with a whole-of-society attitude. Chinese are also pragmatic. When the extreme communist ideology didn't work, the government embraced capitalism. Deng Xiaoping famously said that he didn't care if a cat was black or white as long as it caught mice. China has learned from this and has also opened up to former geopolitical rivals like Japan and the United States, and has been eager to learn from every successful country. As Eric Lee once famously stated, "You cannot change the party in China, but you can change the policies." Number 14, foreign policy and the BRI. China has pursued a robust foreign policy by creating organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS Network, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. China's Belt and Road Initiative has built projects worth more than $4 trillion in over 100 countries in the past decade. In Africa alone, China has built over 10,000 kilometers of new highways and railways, and nearly 1,500 trains carry freight between numerous Chinese and European cities every single month. As China gets older and richer, The next stage of China's growth will come from developing regions like Africa and Latin America, where Chinese companies will build infrastructure and factories. It's a brilliant economic and geopolitical strategy underpinned by a win-win philosophy. Number 15, what's next for China? This is probably the question you're most interested in, because every day we hear in Western media that China is on the verge of collapsing and is going to fail. But what many analysts fail to understand is that the Chinese economy is closely intertwined with the world economy, most especially the United States. Therefore, any decline in China would have ramifications felt across the globe. However, if you go beyond the clickbait headlines and do more research, there is still plenty of opportunity in China. Over the next 5 years, China will be the largest contributor to the world's economic growth, contributing 22.6%, exactly double that of the United States, according to the International Monetary Fund. I want to be clear, because China is certainly experiencing some short-term economic struggles with the declining real estate sector, an aging population, and high youth unemployment. But China is also shifting into the next stage of development and will become an advanced, knowledge-based economy. In manufacturing, China will move up the value chain and focus on products and services of higher profit margins. China's leadership in the fourth industrial revolution will ensure China's dominance in manufacturing for a long time, even as many labor-intensive parts of manufacturing get offshored. Rather than merely assembling smartphones, Chinese workers will be designing and manufacturing high-tech components such as semiconductors, chips, cameras, speakers, and electric batteries. Rather than working in dangerous underground mines, Chinese miners will be sitting at an office and remotely operating machines using the world's most advanced 5 and 6G networks. And finally, Chinese farmers will be deploying drones and self-driving tractors to do more with less. And even the real estate sector in China will continue to grow as developers embrace a new paradigm of quality over quantity. Instead of giant and boring residential towers, architects will be designing individual homes and smaller communities that are aesthetically pleasing and technologically advanced. Think of highways dedicated to autonomous and connected vehicles. Shanghai and Shenzhen will soon be competing with New York and London to be the financial centers of the world. Oil and most commodities will begin to be priced in Chinese yuan by 2025, and this process, of course, is already underway. This introduction of the petro-yuan will herald a new financial world order. In January 2024, 6 new countries will join the BRICS alliance in what is now becoming one of the world's most important economic alliances. The BRICS network already contains over 40% of the world's population and will soon control over 50% of the world's oil exports. While many Westerners believe that China will fail, the reality is that a new China is emerging, and it will continue to be a major part of our world economy. But now it's time to let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Do you think that the Chinese economic model is broken, or do you think that China still has a chance to be a major contributor to our economy? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And as always, I want to thank you for spending time with me today here on YouTube, and I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.